everyone, and welcome back to Two Show Day. My name is Diana Shabai Booker, and I'm your host. Today we have our very first virtual international guest. My guest today is a professional communicator, and she's also a stand-up and improv comic who has performed in the Winnipeg Comedy Festival and Just for Laughs and pretty much every comedy venue I can think of in one great city. Please welcome to the podcast, Kristen Einarson. Hi, Kristen.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I am going to share what you just said before we started recording, that this is the only American podcast that you will be a guest on during this administration.
Yeah. That's
which I appreciate. Elbows
especially
up,
during
baby.
Elbows up, especially during this trade war. That's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you being here. Americans and Canadians can be friends and should be friends, y'all.
Yeah.
So you are a performer of all kinds. You're also a reformed theater kid. So tell us how you got started in this art scene.
So I started taking classes at Manitoba Theatre for Young People in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, which is where we're both from. That's how we know each other.
Yes. Yeah, we went to college together. Yeah.
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 So that's where, I started taking classes there. I joined the musical theater company. I fancied myself like a musical theater star. Which was very exciting. Can you hear, just a quick pause, if we can edit around this, can you hear cutlery noises in the background? Yes. Okay. Is it possible if we wait until later? I'm just talking. Yeah, that's my very sweet partner who was going to be very nice and do our dishes until... And now he's going to stop so I can do an American podcast.
$0 of this podcast are going to the federal government.
Good. No, it's all good. But, okay, so I will start at the beginning again.
Yes.
For editing purposes. So, I started taking classes at Manitoba Theatre for Young People because I had a lot of energy and a lot of potential that my family thought would be best spent in theater class because I was not taking to athletics. I joined the musical theater company. I thought I'm going to be this little alto is going to be on theater stages forever. And that was great. I loved doing theater. After high school, I did a little bit of theater still, and then I stopped probably after going to college. But I always missed it. I love theater still. It's so good.
Yeah.
And doing comedy, especially doing improv, is kind of like doing theater.
Yeah.
Which is really nice.
Yeah, there's this sort of cast of people that you all have to rely on and know the rules of each other. So I imagine it's kind of the same community in that way.
It really is. Yeah, it's really nice. And stand-up is like that too. There is a stand-up community. We all see each other at shows. Even though it's very individualistic, it's still cute and fun most of the time unless you bomb. But some people like to bomb. I'm not there yet.
Really?
But yeah. When some people are bombing, they're like, I'm going to make this such a big challenge to see how much everyone can hate me. That's what they think. They're like, all right, we'll turn this around. So they take their power back. And I've started doing that too when I'm feeling a bomb. It's okay, well, guess what? I rode my bike here. Let's make you hate me. For real.
I wish I lived in that self-confidence world.
It's delusion. It's just delusion. It's all.
That's amazing. Do you remember the first show you ever saw or ever acted in?
The first show I ever saw was Phantom of the Opera. I think it came to the concert hall when we were 8 or something like that. And my grandma took us to see it. And I was like, whoa. I love that Phantom.
Was that before you started doing classes?
I think that was slightly before.
Okay.
It could have inspired me. I know definitely, and I mean, I know we're not very happy with Johnny Depp. I don't think.
Mike and I, just before this, we were recording a bonus episode about theater hot takes, and I brought up Johnny Depp, and I said, stop casting him in movie musicals because he can't sing, but I have a feeling you're about to talk about Johnny Depp in a movie musical.
Yeah, not a movie musical, but like, I remember Pirates of the Caribbean was the first movie I saw and understood that like acting could be a job and it could be a thing that you do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's excellent in Pirates, absolutely.
Oh, he is. He is. Yeah. It's so nice to revisit 2003. It's like, what a nice time. We had no problems. Nothing was wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, as much as I hate to admit it, Phantom is one of those formative shows for me, too. I was a Les Mis girl first, but Phantom is the natural, next step.
The progression, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, there's Phantom, Les Mis, Wicked, Chicago. Those are like your musical theater starter pack, right?
Really? Yeah. Oh, totally. Oh, I love Chicago. Oh my God, I love it.
Now all of those have like movies too, and a lot of cast recordings. So it's like a really accessible way to get into it. So no shame in the Phantom game for sure. Oh man. So using those skills, how did that sort of relay into you getting into comedy?
I mean, I was always cast as the comedic relief because I can't really sing. I can carry a tune, kind of. It's gonna be pretty flat, but I'm not like a singer. I'm not a belter. I can't like hit a high F and be Elphaba. That's just never gonna be in the cards for me. I had so many directors tell me when I was still really trying to be an actor, like in my early 20s, I can't wait till you're 40. And I was like, oh, but what about now? Because I'm just more suited to the character, funny type person. So I always knew I could be comedic on stage.
Sure.
And everyone would laugh at things I said without me wanting them to, which later I figured out... I was like trying to relate to them and they're like, oh, you're so funny. And I was like, thanks, man.
I'm not trying to be.
Exactly. I'm just telling you my story. But yeah, so then I just kind of that knowledge of like, okay, I could do this. And then encouragement from friends. Like the very first time I did stand up, this was before Cree Comedy with Kenton Larson, which is a deep cut that only Diana and I will understand.
Only the Manitoba audience is going to get that. Yeah.
Exactly. But I had done comedy at Women's Open Mic at Jekyll and Hyde's, which is like RIP, disgusting Winnipeg bar. And it went pretty well. And I wrote my set. I felt really good about it. But then I wasn't quite done with acting. And I was like, I want to be an actor. I don't want to be a comedian. Mm-hmm. And then I eventually came back, which was really, really nice. After I was encouraged, I had like a very serious relationship at the time, like implode. And then I didn't really have like a social life outside of that relationship. So then I just started doing comedy. I was like, I hate to be alone with my thoughts. Let's tell everyone what I think on a stage. And here we are now, like 6 years later.
That's amazing. Well, good for you for like, getting that I don't want to call it a piece of advice, that comment about, oh, I can't wait till you're 40. Like, that's kind of a shitty thing to say to somebody who like clearly wants to like be like that ingenue part or the young people's part, but like not, imploding on yourself with that, but being able to take it and be like, I can be funny now and you're going to get all of it. So
yeah, maybe if they'll have me later. If all my drinking hasn't caught up to me and I have no voice left. Just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, some people could just keep trying and trying for that and just ending up heartbroken. So that's just great that you're able to sort of find your niche and do what you love. That's wonderful. I have kind of not a totally similar experience because I'm not a performer, but all my life I've had this very bossy type A personality, And it was, very off-putting to a lot of people. And like in middle school, I had friends like just straight up walk away from me and say like, we don't want to deal with your attitude anymore, which is probably totally valid. Like, oh yeah.
But that's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, for sure. No, it was.
Yeah.
And like in middle school, which is like the worst part of your life.
Oh my God.
Begin with. Yeah. No, it was bad. But then falling into stage managing is like, no, you have to be this way. And we need somebody that is on top of it and is not afraid to be stern with people and tell us where we need to go and like all of this thing. And it's like, oh, there is a place for me.
Exactly.
So,
and I would not describe you as bossy. I would describe you as direct, and people can't tell the difference. I'm also a fellow Aries, so I like it.
Also, I wanted to have you on now because it's March and we're getting into Aries season, which is our season. So
it is.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Let's get into the meat of the show, into Two Show Day. Kristen, what's your show this week?
My show is Rent by Jonathan Larson.
Yay!
I'm so excited.
So for those people who have somehow never heard of Rent, give us the details. When did it premiere? What is it about? Give us everything.
Okay, so Rent, don't take this as fact. Take this as the ramblings of a Canadian who's pretty sure that she's right. So Rent premiered, I believe it was 1996 on Broadway. It was like book and music, both by Jonathan Larson, I hope.
Yep. You wrote the whole thing. Yep.
Oh, so talented. Okay, well, grab your Kleenex because I'm going to make everyone cry if you don't know the story behind Rent. So Rent is based on the opera La Boheme by Puccini, but kind of reimagined to take place in 1980s New York City. And instead of like, I don't know what they were fighting in like tuberculosis maybe in La Boheme, but in Rent, they're dealing with HIV AIDS. And it's like a really great social commentary. It's reimagining a really iconic piece of very highbrow opera and making it more accessible to a younger audience, which I really love.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so great.
Yeah, no, it's really good. Yeah, so all book, music, and lyrics were all by Jonathan Larson, who's, I believe he's only one of two people to ever win the Tony for both book and score, and like on the same musical. I think it's him and Anais Mitchell for Hadestown are the only two people that have done that. Rent is also one of 10 musicals to ever win the Pulitzer. And obviously it ran for like 12 years or something on Broadway. And there was just a big tour of it around North America too. But one of the saddest things about Rent is that Jonathan Larson never got to see any of this success. Because he died the night before the off-Broadway workshop at New York Theater Workshop. And it was like, he had like a freak heart condition that went undetected, and he had
Marfan syndrome. Yeah,
always makes me sad to think about. And he has another musical called Tick Tick Boom, which has a movie with Andrew Garfield in it, who I still feel is robbed of the Oscar.
Yes, me too.
In that movie, so good. Who won? Oh, Will Smith won that year. Yeah, absolutely. Andrew Garfield's. Won. But yeah, so walk through, like, it's modeled after La Boheme, but like talk about like the characters in it a little bit and the sort of community that they put together.
Yeah, the community is like that aspect is probably my favorite part of the show. When it opens, we meet these two bohemian 90s guys, well 80s I guess in this case. We meet Mark and Roger, and they're not gonna pay their rent, you guys. You can't make them, and they're not gonna. So they're like best friends. I don't really know how they met. Best friends, roommates. I think maybe college. I could be projecting because we met in college. Maybe I'm projecting that onto Mark and Roger.
We are Mark and Roger.
We are. We actually are. So the show opens, we're meeting them. They're they're kind of squatting in this building that they're not paying rent for. They don't have heat. They're like burning. They both fancy themselves kind of failed artists, which there's a character arc and they redeem themselves. But Mark is a filmmaker, Roger's a musician, and they're burning their scripts and their little chord charts to get some heat. And then we meet Collins, who is another one of their friends who's traveling back. He's a professor at NYU, I think, or something like that. And this is the least accurate retelling of Rent there ever has been, probably. Sorry, everyone. I hope you don't get hate mail from this episode. Who vetted this girl? But so this whole thing is centered around this kind of this big apartment building that all these people live in. So then we meet Mimi, who is a sex worker. She's a dancer. I shouldn't say she's a sex worker. I think she's a stripper, but I don't know if that's the right thing to say.
Yes.
So
she's a dancer at a club for sure.
She's an exotic dancer. There we go.
Yeah.
And then we also meet Angel, who is just like a beautiful, she is, I don't know if it ever explicitly says that she's transgender, but that is the idea that we're getting. So in the 80s and 90s, these and a lot of them end up having HIV/AIDS. Some of them have HIV. Some of them, it progresses to full-blown AIDS in a time where the government really didn't care because it just seemed to affect gay people and sex workers. And it just wasn't totally, they didn't care. So it's really a family vibe. There's a villain. His name is Benny. Of course, his name is Benny, that guy. And it's just, it's all their adventures in Alphabet City in New York. And it's beautiful.
Yeah. It has this really great, it's very much in the time period that it was in. And we talked about falsettos in our last episode. And this is kind of the AIDS crisis has sort of progressed because we have a couple of characters that are on medication for AIDS now too and are kind of managing it. And we have, which is kind of amazing, depending, considering they're living in squalor, but they're still able to get access to this medication, which is amazing. So it's sort of see how that has progressed, but it's also just a great representation of all these different kinds of people that are together, right? Mimi is, she mentions that she's Spanish, and traditionally Angel and Collins are also played by people of color. And so is Joanne. We haven't talked about Joanne and...
Yes.
Oh my God. Maureen. Yes.
Maureen. So dream role. Maureen. So fun. Cannot sing it.
Oh my God.
Cannot sing it.
But you would do an incredible Over the Moon.
Yeah, I would.
So there's Mark and Roger, and Maureen is Mark's ex-girlfriend who is now dating Joanne, and there's kind of this stereotypical promiscuous bisexual stereotype in here, but again, it was the 90s. And so Mark and Joanne kind of bond about how manipulative Maureen is, and it always has to be her way. And Angel finds Collins on the street after he's been beat up and takes care of him and does some very crazy things for money.
Yes.
That's and has that sort of brings everybody together, and Angel is always the cheerleader of the group. And she's always guys, we got to stick together, let's stop fighting over these dumb things. And it is kind of a sign of the times that we can look at Angel now and say, oh yeah, Angel is definitely trans, but even in the musical, her pronouns go back and forth, and we don't really know if she's drag queen or non-binary or what it is now. So I think actually when I saw the tour recently, they changed some lyrics to make it no, Angel is specifically trans, they changed those pronouns or something. Or they changed, I can't remember. I knew what it was at the time, but I don't remember what it is now. But
was there still the line should we spoil what happens? I have a question, but that might mean spoiling something huge.
I mean, it's an AIDS musical, so it's kind of
right.
It's someone will die. Yeah.
Right.
Don't introduce AIDS into a musical or a work if somebody doesn't die from AIDS most of the time. So
that's so true. What if, like, I hope in the future, because treatment has gotten so much better for people.
Yes.
Like, they can treat it before it becomes AIDS. They can be treated with HIV. They don't pass it on necessarily after a certain amount of time. Again, consult a doctor. Don't listen to me. But it's progressed so much more. It'd be so cool to have a character who is living with HIV or AIDS, and it's just kind of like normalized. It's like, yeah, they take medication, and that's great, and that's it. But yeah, in the 80s and 90s, just devastating AIDS content, like Angels in America. Oh boy.
Yes.
Yeah, Falsettos. I was
thinking about that one. Falsettos is such a heartbreaker. But yeah, even at Angels in America, it's like Pryor lives at the end. Spoiler alert for all 4 hours of Angels in America. But it's like, even that was like, whoa, we have this main character, and he like is suffering from AIDS. He is very sick, and he's like, no, I'm going to keep going. The work continues. Yeah. You don't see a character that just is living with HIV or AIDS in musicals or in anything really anymore. I know you wanted to talk about, you saw a Keith Haring exhibit recently.
I did last summer. I saw, can I press pause on that? And I have a question about Mark. So in the production you saw where they made her transgender, where they made Angel transgender, in Mark's eulogy, there's like, I might cry. Oh my God, I'm going to burst into tears. Anyway, no, I'm not. If I do, just don't look at me. It's going to be fine. But like,
let's cut to something else. Yeah, it'll be fine.
Exactly. Take a commercial break. I can wave my cat in front of the camera until I can gather myself. In Mark's eulogy, he's talking about Angel, and he says he, and there's a real moment, and then he corrects himself and he says she, and it's like meant to be taken as maybe like an acceptance of her true identity. Did they still have that in the touring version that you saw?
I feel like that was still... Okay, a couple of changes. In Happy New Year, Maureen used to say, "Let me be your slave," to Joanne, but now she says, "You're the one I crave." So we take out the word slave.
Okay.
And in one of Alexi Darling's voicemails to Mark, she used to say, "Just saw Alec Baldwin," but then now she says Kevin Costner. So Alec Baldwin is canceled.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They did not change her pronouns, except when Mark has that moment. That moment is still in there.
Oh, good.
So there's some moments at Angel's funeral. I think Colin says, "I can't believe he's gone," or something like that. So those are still in there. So, but yeah. So, we talked a little bit about Keith Haring in our last episode with Falsettos, and I learned that the Keith Haring-inspired art was, like, intentional from the beginning. The producers wanted that to be part of it the whole time. So, you saw this exhibit in Minneapolis, I think?
Yeah, we took a road trip to Minneapolis in, I think, August of last year. And it just happened to be on at the Walker Art Center, and it was really beautiful, and it was so impactful and so political. And it was called Art is for Everybody, which I think is just so beautiful. And I think Rent kind of exemplifies that, because it's not super highbrow, like, oh, I hope you want to see La Boheme, I hope you speak French, or else you're not going to know what's going on. I love making art accessible, whether that's like taking a very classical opera and making it a rock opera, or just like explaining a symphony and making it a little bit more relevant to today. I just think there's something beautiful about that. I don't think we should gatekeep art.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast, is have people come on and talk about what they're passionate about. And I always try to make it a point to say, like, okay, if someone has never heard of Rent before, where do you think are good access points? Are there cast recordings? There's a Rent movie. Oh, thoughts on the Rent movie?
That was my introduction to Rent. I watched it when I was way too young. Like, I think kind of shortly after it came out. When we would have been like 10 or 11.
10, yeah.
Yeah. And my parents had recorded it on our like PVR when I was sick. They're like, we don't know anything about this, but it's a musical, and musicals are all Disney, so they're all kid appropriate, right? They didn't know. They didn't understand what they were doing. And then so I like watched this movie musical, and I was like, I know everything about sex. Like, that was my my very young
I'm going to be a dancer in New York City.
I will play Mimi one day. Yeah, exactly. Like, I really believed that. I was like, I could totally do it without any context of like, I am a white person and no, I will not be playing Mimi ever.
The Rent movie is, some people are not a fan of it, but it does something really weird where most of the original Broadway cast members came back for the movie 10 years later. Yeah. Which is like pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Rent has a lot of good access points, actually. There's the cast recording, there's the movie, there's the final Broadway performance that they filmed, which is wonderful. And then there's also Rent Live, when they did it, when Jordan Fisher broke his foot. Or no, Jordan Fisher was Mark. The guy that played Roger broke his foot. And they had to like show pre-recorded footage.
Oh, no.
He wasn't actually live for most of it. But yeah, Rent is probably one of those musicals that's in like the musical starter pack. Because it is so accessible, and I feel like because there are so many characters, you can kind of see yourself as one of them or pick your favorite, and you get to follow their story throughout the whole thing. But it's a really good choice, and really still impactful to this day. I think it's definitely more of a period piece. It's not like the topical stick it to the man kind of thing that it used to be.
And some things didn't age well. It's like, you just gotta pay your rent, okay? We all have to.
Just everyone live together in one big old apartment and just split it 8 ways.
Just be a family. It's fine. Exactly. And they are a family. But what is your opinion of the Rent movie, if I may ask you a question?
Yeah. So when I got into Rent for the first time, it was I was in college, and it like really hit me hard, and I was like deep into Rent for a really long time, to the point that even when I saw the tour 3 years ago now, I like knew immediately when there were lyric changes, and I could put them on my Instagram story that I remembered them. So like, I was into it deep. And I remember, like, I know some people don't like it, but I remember watching it being like, this is pretty close. Like, I don't really see what the big deal is. I mean, there were a couple of things like the original Mimi did not come back because Mimi is like 19, and she says she's 19, and obviously 10 years later someone does not look 19. So that I think was controversial. And there's a song Roger sings called One Song Glory, and they have sort of visions of how his ex-girlfriend transmitted HIV to him, and some people weren't happy with that depiction.
Interesting.
But like, overall, I think it's pretty good for movie musical adaptation. There are definitely far worse. I haven't seen it in a little while, but I would, if someone had never seen Rent and like wanted to see it today, I would say throw on the movie.
That's what I'd say too. I actually kind of appreciated, I shouldn't say appreciated, that's maybe the wrong word, but when it showed the depictions of how Roger, his girlfriend transmitted AIDS to him. I was like, okay, so now we're getting an extra layer, because he kind of only mentions he's in the flirty song where, like, Light My Candle. There's one line where he's like, I used to be a junkie, where when Mimi's trying to just be like, oh, I'm shaking and sweating for no reason, I just have a cold. And he's like, I can see through you. But that's kind of the only mention of his like drug addiction. And I think it's kind of amazing that this man, his girlfriend dies by suicide because they have AIDS. He's dealing with this very complex disease that's very highly stigmatized. And also he gets sober. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Good for you, Roger.
Right. Well, definitely living below the poverty line too. Like, they're like, Mark's mom sends him a hot plate, but like that's kind of the only connection they have to anybody, like to their families. We don't really see their parents too much, and they're like, you know, 25, something like that. So yeah, they are living on their own to just have this crazy artist's life. And yeah, to overcome all of that is insane. And Roger's often really written off as like this whiny character, and like he kind of is, because his only goal throughout this musical is to write his one great song, which like debatable on if he even does it or not, but
but I also like
a lot definitely before.
He goes through so much, and that just reminded me of the Keith Haring exhibit. Keith Haring died super young. He was 31 years old when he died. So like he was constantly, they talked about in the exhibit, he was just constantly making art, like constantly like, I have to do something. I have to leave something behind. Like this can't be it. Like he knew he was going to die. So I think like, yeah, Roger is totally a whiny little bitch sometimes. Absolutely he is. But I understand that, like, I shouldn't say I understand, because I haven't lived his same experiences, but it's like, yeah, if you want to make something of yourself and you're 25 and you maybe thought you had like 60 or 70 or more years to live, and now it's probably going to be maybe 2, it's like, that makes sense to me. I stand for Roger. Are we still saying that?
We stand. Listen.
We stand.
Now we stand. This is a millennial run podcast. You can use whatever slang you feel comfortable with. I'm going to talk about the musical I actually prepared today. So thinking about this, I was like, okay, Kristen's going to talk about Rent. What should I talk about? And we talked about falsettos in the last episode. So that's like the obvious AIDS musical connection. And it did dawn on me to talk about Angels in America, but I was like, I don't know if I want to just focus on that connection. So the connection I chose was shows Diana was obsessed with in college.
Love it.
So the other musical I was obsessed with, and we've talked about it so much on this podcast, but we've never deep dived into it yet, is Spring Awakening.
Oh my God, I love Spring Awakening.
Oh, good. I didn't tell you I was doing it, so I hope you know it. Okay. So for the uninitiated, Spring Awakening is the book and lyrics were written by Stephen Sater, and the music is by Duncan Sheik. The original production was directed by Michael Meyer. The off-Broadway premiere came first in 2006, and then premiered on Broadway the same year. Other notable productions, there was a West End production in 2008, and there was the Deaf West revival in 2015, where they had deaf and hard of hearing actors on stage doing sign language, and then they were accompanied by they had a counterpart hearing actor that would sing, and some of them accompanied themselves on instruments as well, which is really cool. Some of the notable cast members that came out of Spring Awakening were Leah Michele, Jonathan Groff, John Gallagher Jr., who won a Tony for playing Moritz, Gideon Glick, Skylar Astin. Some of the revivals included Ali Stroker, who also now has a Tony Award, Krista Rodriguez, and for the Winnipeggers, I just learned this week, on the first national tour of Spring Awakening playing Ilsa was Steffi Di Domenicantonio, who has done a lot of work at Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre. Yeah, she was in Next Normal, Cabaret, and Come From Away, and I think she's still in the sit-down production in Toronto right now, so that's really cool.
That's so cool.
So the main players in Spring Awakening are Melchior, who is an intelligent and this takes place in Germany in 1980, so everybody has weird German names. So there's Melchior, who's an intelligent, headstrong, and rebellious schoolboy. He's probably about 14 or so. There's Moritz, who is a frantic, anxious kid. He's Melchior's best friend. And then the other boys are Ernst, Hanschen, Otto, and Georg, who are also around, but I'm just going to focus on the main players. Then the girls are Vendla, she's curious but sheltered. She's Melchior's childhood friend. There's Ilsa, who's left an unstable home to live in an unstable artist colony. There's Marta, who suffers abuse at the hands of her parents at home. There's also Taya and Anna are the other girls. And then there are adults in the picture. There are various parents and teachers. They're usually played by one man and one woman. When I stage managed this production, we actually split up that role. And so we had 3 adult men and 3 adult women, kind of split it up, which made it kind of interesting. I think, like, you can do it either way. When it's one man and one woman, it sort of represents, like, all adults are saying the same thing, and they're all kind of, you know, it doesn't matter what they look like. And when we split it up, it felt sort of more like there's more pressing against the kids. Like, there's more, you know, against them in this world. So however you want to stage Spring Awakening, you can do that. So the story beats of this show, I'll try. There's many characters, so there's a lot going on. But here's the first act. So we open with Venla, and she sings a song called Mama Who Bore Me. And Venla is very much in her I'm not a girl, I'm not yet a woman phase. She's kind of finding things out. Her body is developing. She has a lot of questions. Her sister has just had her second child, but Venla doesn't know how babies are made. So she asks her mother, but her mother kind of brushes her off, and she's left in the dark. And then they do a Mama Who Bore Me reprise, which is a little bit more rock and roll. And the other girls join her in the reprise, which kind of shows, like, it's not just Venla's family. It's like, this is kind of the way it is right now. We go to the boys. They're in Latin class. It's very much what you think of an 1890s German Latin class. They're writing on chalkboards, and the teacher is threatening everybody with stick. Moritz is chastised by the teacher for not conjugating properly, and Melchior stands up for him. And Melchior sings a song called All That's Known about the oppressive system and how he's going to be different and break out of it. And then the boys all sing The Bitch of Living about how it sucks to be a teenager, and I just wrote real.
Yeah, so real.
Which, that song is just, it is just pure teen angst and frustration, and just, I can't. It's so good. And the staging of it is always excellent. They're still in the classroom, and they're, like, jumping up on the chairs and the desks, and it's just, I remember when we did that show, that was probably one of the numbers that it took the longest to, like, get it. Like, the guys had their choreography, and, you know, they were doing it, but it was like, it's not there, like, the energy isn't there. And once they got it, it was like they got it. And then it was, like,
so good.
Magic. Yeah. So then we have 2 group songs about teen horniness. One is Fun, which is called My Junk, and then the other one is Beautiful and Meaningful, which is called Touch Me. Touch Me is it's
beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And I don't know, I can't even describe it, but the way this show kind of floats back and forth in between songs that could, like, kind of fit the period and songs that are a little bit more, like, rock, or just, like, it kind of goes through all these genres, but they always seem to fit so perfectly. It's, so wonderful. So after that, Venla and Melchior reconnect in the woods, and it's very, like, Midsummer Night's Dream. Like, I think she goes, like, I'm just dreaming down by the stream. It's like, okay, girl, what are you doing? But they haven't really seen each other since childhood, and they're seeing each other turning into, you know, young adults, and they sing The Word of Your Body, which is sort of, they have this sort of will they won't they moment, but ultimately nothing happens at this point, and he walks her home like a gentleman. So the girls later meet up, and it's discovered that Marta is beaten by her father, and the musical kind of takes a dark twist from here, and it goes from teen angst and romance into this, like, very real, brutal place. And there are, you know, she sings a song called The Dark I Know Well, where we find out it's also sexual abuse. And Ilsa, who has run away from home, joins her in this song, so we sort of know why she left. So we see sort of the person who has left the situation for perhaps not a better situation, because she's living in this artist colony, and she comes on the scene later, and she talks about how one of the artists she was with, who she says, oh, this guy is such a genius, but he woke me up with a gun to my chest today. So it's like, that's not great either. So things are not good in 1890s Germany, is is the point.
Yeah.
So after this song, Venla is really fascinated by this. She is not beaten at home, and she like wants to know how it feels. So she meets Melchior in the woods again, and she begs him to beat her with a switch, and he initially refuses, and but then he does it gently, and then he gets really carried away, and he actually beats her and throws her to the ground, and then he runs off in shame, and he leaves her there. Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. And
That's...
he says yeah. And she's like, so he's like hitting her very softly, and she says like, I can't even feel it. And she's like, do it harder. And then he says, you bitch, I'll beat the hell out of you, is the line. And he throws her
Mommy
to the
issues.
Yeah. It's very funny because there's all these stories I'm telling about how the parents are abusive and they're not telling their kids things. But then we do see Melchior's parents too, and she's like very accepting. She's like, sure, you can read Faust, like whatever, I'm just here to support you. And she's like too off. She's too hands off. And that also leads to like Melchior, like sometimes you need to be the right level of connected to your children.
Yeah.
So that's the problem too. Okay, so Venla's on the ground. Then we go back to Moritz, who has found out that he has failed his final exam, and he will not he will not move on to the next grade. So he works up the courage to tell his father, who slaps him and tells him that he's brought shame and embarrassment to the family. So Moritz writes to Melchior's mother, who's kind of his only adult friend. She's shown him kindness in the past, and he asks if she will lend him money so he can run away to America under the veiled threat that he will commit suicide otherwise. So she turns him down, but she offers to talk to his parents instead, which he does not like that option. So Melchior and Venla meet up. This is now the end of Act 1. Melchior and Venla meet up in a hayloft where everyone else is at choir practice. That's in the script. And they apologize to each other about what happened earlier, and they have sex. So it's very much left up to interpretation. In the original off-Broadway production, it was like definitely Melchior is raping her.
Whoa.
But in subsequent productions, yeah, it's made a little bit more consensual. I looked at the stage directions today because I still have my digital script, and the stage directions have Venla sort of taking control sometimes, but Melchior definitely has to convince her, and so it doesn't specifically spell it out. So depending on your production of Spring Awakening, it could be very consensual, it could be not. So that's the end of Act 1. And I won't give away too much for Act 2, but everything I've talked about comes to a head. There's a really beautiful scene with Moritz and Ilsa, who are also childhood friends that meet up, and that is some of my favorite parts of the show. Venla's family learns what happens when you don't give your kids proper sexual education, and Moritz's family learns what happens when you don't support your child at all.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's
so good.
It's nuts. I don't know quite what was running through my head when both of these musicals were like the thing that I was obsessed with, going through some shit in college, perhaps.
Weren't we all?
So yeah. It's definitely still in my teen angst phase.
Yeah.
It was like teen angst, but I guess I had enough perspective to look back on those years and still see them as like those problems. But yeah, I remember I was taking the bus to an evening class, and I remember like looking down my street for the bus, listening to Mama Who Bore Me for the first time. Like it was impactful in my life the first time I heard this music. And for a long time, it was my favorite musical I had never seen until last year when I got the opportunity to stage manage it. And yeah, we've talked a lot. I've had 2 people who were involved in that production on so far, but it was easily one of my favorite theater experiences. And if the cast and crew reunited today, I would do it in a heartbeat. Yeah, the director, Brian Clementi, who I had on my old podcast, I truly mean when I say that he is just a visionary, and his vision was so clear from the start, and his willingness to like get up on stage and walk through the parts with the actors, and everything was just handled with care and precision, and no detail was too small to not make perfect. And at our wrap party before I left, I remember he gave me a hug and he said I was tremendous, and I started crying because it meant so much to me. Like, it was just a fabulous experience. And I found that with shows that are really heavy like this, like I just did a show called The Pillow Man. You heard that show? It's a Martin McDonagh
seen
play.
It. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Dark
an
as hell,
intense
right? Like,
show.
It's intense. But both with that show and with this show, like, there was so much camaraderie with the actors, and like everything ran so smoothly, and there were like so many laughs and like good times that you have when you have to be vulnerable and have these like portray these dark stories, that they make them like really joyful experiences. So from my upbeat description, if you've never heard of Spring Awakening and you would like to, there are several ways you can get into it. There's the original Broadway cast recording. There's also a cast recording in German, which is pretty cool. It's like a live cast recording.
Oh, wow.
And there's also a documentary called Spring Awakening, Those You've Known, where the original cast did a reunion concert, and they kind of splice back and forth between the concert and stories that the cast tells, including an insane story Leah Michelle tells about how Jonathan Groff, a gay man, did not know what female genitalia looked like, and she showed him. So,
oh my Lord. Okay, I have a couple Spring Awakening stories, if I may share.
Please.
I used to do a lot of theater with a woman named Frances Concan, who's a playwright. She's from Winnipeg. Like, when she was first writing plays and like producing them in the Winnipeg Fringe Festival, I was in those plays. We worked together for like 5 years or something before I retired from acting at the age of 21. But I think she saw Spring Awakening on Broadway like a couple hundred times. So
wow.
just by virtue of knowing her, that's how I think I like downloaded on iTunes. I like bought with an iTunes gift card the Spring Awakening soundtrack, because that's what we did before Spotify. Right? Yeah.
Individually downloading songs for 99 cents a piece.
Oh, yes. Love it.
Did she live in New York at the time? Or did she like travel to see it that many times?
I think she was just traveling to see it that many times, which I have no idea how much that would have cost, but like the dedication. But the first show we did together was called Hamlet, a New Musical, and I can definitely now see the parallels. Like, I could see she was so inspired by the music of Spring Awakening, and she's like quite an amazing piano player too, so she wrote all the music. Okay. So I felt like I had knowledge of Spring Awakening then. And then fast forward a couple years later in Winnipeg Studio Theatre put on a production of Spring Awakening starring two Winnipeg Broadway babies. Like, very shortly after they did the show, they ended up on Broadway. So Samantha Hill, I'm pretty sure that's her name, she was Christine in Phantom.
Yes.
Yeah.
She was Christine in Phantom, that's right. And then she was Cosette in the Les Mis revival, yeah.
Yeah. And then Nick Belak, who was Elder, I think, Cunningham in Book of Mormon, the funny one.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So I got to see them both.
The Josh Gad part, yeah.
Yes. Like, Samantha was Wendla, and then Nick, I think, was in the chorus and had some like funny things too. I can't totally remember, but that was very cool to get to see them like so young before their prime. I think I forced my parents to come with me to see Spring Awakening, and I forced them into so many uncomfortable situations, which like I now am understanding, because I just had no idea, like just being like, oh, I think they told me about that in health class, and now being like a grown lady, I'm like, why did I make my mom sit beside me for this? Like, this is crazy. Anyway, yeah.
Oh my God.
Spring
Good
Awakening.
That's great.
They are so, they dealt with a lot, and they also very wisely told me not to go to theater school and to study communications instead so that I could pay my bills, which I'm very grateful for in hindsight. Thank you. And they also are supportive, but also practical.
Listen, sometimes theater finds you. I mean, we did the same college program. I went to school for communications. It's the same program my mom went into. And now I do a job in the theater that has nothing to do with that degree. But
Perfect. Good. But you're like living your dream, it seems.
I am.
It's so
a good job.
great.
It's a good job for a bossy lady. Yeah. So
for a direct woman.
For a direct woman. It's funny you bring up Winnipeg Studio Theater because I often tell people that I saw Andrea Macassette in Heathers at Winnipeg Studio Theater. She was Heather Duke, and she was the original Anne Boleyn in Six on Broadway. So,
I know.
And I got to see her in that too. So it was very cool. Yeah.
There's a lot of talent that comes from Winnipeg. People don't realize. I got to be on CBC's Laugh Out Loud radio show, which Americans probably won't know what that is, but like that's like BBC, but in Canada. National comedy program. Very exciting.
CBC is a big deal. Absolutely.
Yeah. I got hate mail from that recording. Yeah. But anyway, that's another story for another day. But like the host of, oh, what a cliffhanger. Okay, I'll tell you quickly after. But like the host, the host of the show actually said, Winnipeg comics are really good because we can get polished. It's not like Toronto where it's like a fight to get any sort of stage time. And obviously very successful people come from Toronto. A lot of very successful Winnipeg people have moved to Toronto to find great success there. But there's something about Winnipeg. It's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's something about Winnipeg. I love my life now. I love where I'm living now, but I do miss Winnipeg for sure. I'm coming home for my birthday, so I'm really excited to see it all again. Yeah.
Oh my God, should we?
For a few days.
If you have time, because that'll be a very packed few days, because we're both turning a big number this year. But if you have time, we should go for like coffee or a drink if you have time. No pressure.
I would love that. I will text you separately, and we will not make our plans while we're recording. But
I think we should make our plans while we're recording.
Okay. Well, I'm seeing. If you want, I'm seeing Connor too. So if you want to tag on,
I will, if that's okay. Or you guys can. Okay, we'll figure it out.
Insane.
I can't wait. Oh my goodness.
That sounds great. Kristen, thank you so much for being on today. You are such a joy to be around, and I'm so happy I got to see your face. Can we please see Stacy the cat?
Yes. He was sleeping. Oh no.
The baby boy. The listeners should know that Kristen named her boy cat Stacy so that she could be Stacy's mom.
Yes, a mentally stable decision that he has to live with for the rest of his life. Yes.
He loves it.
Right? He does. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This is so nice.
Two Show Day is created and hosted by Diana Shabai Booker. It is executive produced by Diana and is produced and edited by Michael McCord. You can contact Two Show Day at twoshow.daypodcast@gmail.com and find all our socials on Linktree at linktr.ee/2showday. Two Show Day is independently owned by Diana Shabai Booker. It is part of the Collaborative Studios network. All opinions expressed herein are not necessarily the opinions of Collaborative Studios, Proctor's Collaborative, or any of its affiliates or partners. If you're interested in becoming a part of Collaborative Studios, you can reach us at collaborativestudios@proctors.org.